yeah, you can build it yourself, but is your data center an AI scale data center? Or is it just a normal data center that takes conventional Intel, Wintel, workloads, and now you want to run it as an AI data center, and you want to kind of scale your AI within your data center?
Yeah, and it's good luck with
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Good luck with that. Exactly. Hello and welcome. My name is Richard Simon. I am Cloud Therapist. This is the November episode of Cloud State of Play. We are about a month shy of making it to 3.5 years of Cloud State of Play episodes. I can't believe that. It's actually been a really long time, and hopefully long may it continue. I also can't believe that it's November already. Wow. What happened to the year? Paul, what happened to the year? What happened to 2025?
Same thing that happened to my hair, I think. It changed very, very rapidly. I mean, it's been a strange year, hasn't it? But it's rushed by.
Yeah,
Absolutely rushed.
yeah, it has. And same thing that happened to 2024 as well, I think.
I think
Anyway,
that's a
yeah,
sign of age, unfortunately.
yes, indeed. Okay, so I wanted to welcome uh Paul properly, the exemplary Paul Bevan. So Paul is now a civilian, so I won't be trying to remember that long title anymore, as we said in the previous episode. So we're not going to bother with that anymore.
I might not
So
be civil, but I'm a civilian, but I might
yeah,
not.
yeah, you are a civilian now, definitely. It's just a jokey term. I think it's quite cool. All right. So our topics for this month. Hope you guys are ready for this. First topic is cloud migration strategies. The only R's that you need. And we'll talk about what those R's mean. That's the letter R. Lots of different words for that, and we'll come to that in a minute. Second question, or second topic. It's actually a question anyway. So, what does it take to become AI native? So, not exactly what you should probably think AI native means, but we'll explore this particular post that Paul and I picked up on. And then the third topic is it the beginning of the end for traditional observability? So those are our three topics for this month. I can't wait to dive in. But first, here is a quick channel message for you. Did you know that 80% of you watching right now aren't subscribed yet to this channel? Come on, guys, we can do better, surely. So please hit subscribe and the notification bell. It costs nothing, but it really helps me to keep making more videos for you. All right, back to the therapy session. Okay, so our first topic is cloud migration strategies, the only R's you need. Now, the first chart I think we're going to look at, and I'll try and put this up on the screen so you guys can see it, is from a lady called Vishakha Sadhwani. Apologies if I'm butchering the name there. She is a solutions architect at Nvidia, and she's ex-Google. So hopefully she knows what she's talking about there. Now, in her chart, she's offering the 7 R's of migration, and we'll get to the R's, what the R stands for, in all 7 migration strategies. Now, I'm in kind of in agreement that the outcomes after you kind of do an assessment in your data center may indicate more options. So you kind of she's stretched it to kind of 7. Maybe that's clearly defining it a little bit more. But really migrating to public cloud for me, Paul, I don't know about you, breaks down to 4 options. And I'll highlight what the differences are between what Vishakha has actually put on her chart and what I would normally put on my chart. Again, I will try and show my chart on the screen so you guys can see it. And we'll share as much of that information with you in the description of the video as well. All the links will be there. But yeah, there's kind of a difference in terms of the stage. I tend to focus really on, if you were to migrate to cloud, what does that look like? What's the technology, and what are the four options that you essentially have? And it's kind of, that's my focus there. I do have all the other ones maybe around, or there's at least two more. I do like a 6 hours, I guess, of migration, if you want to call it that. But I focus on the 4 stages, which are the 4 options to migrate you to cloud. Now, for me, and again, you can comment on this in a bit, Paul, that migration journey is not necessarily linear. So, you don't have to do it kind of stage 1, then stage 2, and then stage 3. And we'll talk about all the R's and what they mean in a minute. But it seems to be that organizations do that, or at least those who, ever achieve it to kind of all 4 stages, or they go through to stage 4. Obviously, for startups, it's not the same. So, startups are kind of born into cloud native. Some of them go to stage 4, and again, we'll describe what that means. But most of the kind of other organizations that have a lot of legacy and heritage that they need to bring with them, they don't really make it to that. And I think obviously this causes things like innovation to stall, skills stagnate, and obviously, as we've seen recently, the costs of doing business in cloud rises as well for them. And this, I guess, this is where the sort of the alleged cloud repatriation comes in, and where kind of most enterprises are essentially stuck on my stage 1 of the sort of the migration. So I'll pause there for a minute before we kind of go into the details of it. But what was your view on Vishakha's kind of 7 R's of migration there?
Well, I mean, they all make sense as a sort of standalone, but they don't. I agree with you. They don't. There's a core of what she's put down, which matches the core of your rehost, replatform, refactor, and re-architect piece. Yeah. Although there are some differences about what she's put in each, and it would be interesting to discuss. Yeah. But some of them, I don't see that as being cloud at all. It's like just general IT ops you should be doing anyway. I mean, her retire. Well, are you not doing that on an ongoing basis? And that's nothing to do with migration if you just retire the damn thing.
Yeah.
So I think, there are, there was nothing in there that he said, well, that's crazy, but it doesn't quite all marry up to what I would call cloud migration. And my only argument, I say only other argument with the way she's put it down is that she assumes that that everything is cloud, and clearly some of the things she's talking about are not cloud in the first place.
Yes.
They're not cloud at all.
Correct.
So anyway, but we can sort of go through those. So yeah, a lot of sensible stuff in there, but it's conflated with hosting, it's conflated with just retiring systems, and they think that's not migration.
Correct. Yes. And I mean, I guess she's trying to cover all the bases with the 7. We've seen it as 5 R's. I do the 6 R's. We're seeing 7 here. Some people are kind of maybe taking it even further than that, beyond that. But I think, and kind of calling it a migration strategy, again, yeah, you could maybe call it that. But as you said, they're not all about migrating into cloud. Some of them are about, things like repurchase. She has that, and you kind of go from on-prem into SaaS. And that's fair enough. I mean, like your HR system may not survive the migration. So, you just say, okay, let's just go to, Workday or SDX Central, whatever they're called, some of the SaaS solutions for HR, and so on. And that's fine. But I think kind of calling that a strategy is not really, it's just something that, it's just a process that you need to go through and you need to do. It's not necessarily a kind of a sort of a strategy as such in terms of the migration. Now, I think when you're in the cloud, I think then you have your sort of strategy, operating model, and things like that coming. We won't tax the word strategy too much because we already covered it a couple of months ago, and we kind of went a bit haywire with that. I think. With that guy's post as well on it. But like I said, for me, it's really a focus on what is going to go into the cloud. Everything else, you maybe put on a back burner, or it's a phase 2 or even a phase 3, and so on. It's the migration into the cloud, looking into what apps you're going to actually look at migrating into cloud, and what do they look like, when they go into the cloud. So for me, the four that I put up on my chart are not based necessarily on the sort of AWS or Azure or Microsoft sort of hours of migration. They're really more about what do you have to do to achieve that stage? What does the application now look like? What does the business service look like? Not necessarily the platform, not necessarily the hypervisor, not necessarily the kind of the, how does this look to the business? It's actually the technical aspect of, if I do this and I want to get it to stage 2 or stage 3, what does it look like? What do I have to do to put this app into that stage? And the reason I do it like that is because you have to adopt, as an enterprise, you have to adopt certain technologies in all of those stages, and you have to learn those technologies. You have to go and certify people, you have to go and train them and enable them, and they need dev and test environments to play with all this stuff, and so on. So especially when you for example, do things like containerization, then you start using orchestration platforms like Kubernetes. Okay, you may not necessarily need that in stage 1 because that's a rehost. So that's a lift and shift, a pure lift and shift. And I think Vishakha's chart agrees with that on the rehost. I think we both agree on it being a lift and shift. But then she kind of diverges from my stage 2. My replatform, or her replatform, says lift, tinker, and shift. So that's kind of almost right, but not quite, because she says she wants to make some changes to the application, but essentially it's a lift and shift. So, the database may be different, some backend or whatever might be different, but actually she's not replatforming it as I would kind of term a replatform. A replatform for me is no longer running it in a virtual machine, which is what lift and shift or rehost is. That stage 1. Stage 2 for me, a replatform, is a lift and reshape, as I would call it, because what you're doing is you still have your old monolithic app. So look up the chart, as we said, guys, that we shared with you. You're still running the monolithic app, but now really stage 2, you want to containerize it. You actually want to put that monolithic application, as horrible as that sounds, into a container. And believe me, I've spoken to enough people at exec dinners to confirm that that's what a lot of global system integrators do for their customers. And this is stage 2 is the first step, I think, that you start getting into some of those cloud native technologies like containers and Kubernetes. I'll stop there for you to come in, Paul.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything you said there. I mean, the interesting thing from my perspective as well is that she's not very clear about what are the lift and shift applications that you're bringing in. One of the things that you made very clear in yours is the difference between traditional IT and what you call transient IT.
Yeah.
Traditional IT being the mainframe, the old servers, etc. But transient IT, your beloved HCI and various other things that can cause problems. But and where we were seeing some of the real mismatches in terms of repatriation is where I think particularly during COVID, people were thinking they could take a whole monolithic mainframe app and put it straight into a container in a cloud, it would work. So I think, but she's not very clear, I think. I think you very much, she's put about just leaving them where they are, which is probably your trad IT, but it's not clear what she means by the sort of the rehosting lift and shift. I think it needs some clarification, I think, and I think yours is clearer.
Yeah,
And I've always said, and we've had this conversation in the past. For me, cloud is two things. It's a consumption model, but
model.
it's a set of tools, services, and if you like, techniques, almost like cultural techniques of delivering applications that is quite unique to that environment. It's not like it used to be done, and I
Yeah,
think but you have to separate the two. And I think because people use the term cloud when really it's nothing to do with those new tools and services and sort of
yeah.
capabilities that cloud really brings. And I think that's wrong. And again, even with what she's written, there are areas where you look and think, hold on a minute, she sounds like she's talking about hosting rather than cloud.
Yeah, well, I mean, so I like I said, I do bring in the kind of the six R's. I'm just focusing on the cloud ones because those are kind of more important for me in terms of, okay, what does it take to really get into the cloud? You have your, as you said, you have your sort of traditional IT, which is will eventually be retired, not necessarily straight away, especially if you have like mainframes and you're invested in things like Oracle databases and what have you. That's not going to disappear overnight. You have the transient IT, which you mentioned. That kind of is the retain. So you will retain that because that's relatively new in contrast with kind of your more sort of traditional data center stuff. But that eventually, again, that's not really cloud. Again, the hyper-converged, OpenStack, all that, all that kind of stuff, software-defined, whatever you have, all of that will eventually move to cloud. You have to look at those kind of as an interim step. And then, as we said, stage one is the rehost. So that's a pure lift and shift. That's taking your existing virtual machine that's running either in VMware vSphere from your data center or in a KVM environment, whether it's on top of your Nutanix hyperconverged platform or OpenStack. They both use the same thing, or Proxmox or anything else. Really, essentially, they're all using KVM. You take that and you put that into that stage one. So you're kind of rehosting the virtual machine. So one virtual machine for another. Sometimes AWS calls them instances, but essentially it's the same thing. It's a virtual machine. So you're really not changing. You're just changing the host. You're not changing the app or anything. Now, for me, as I said, replatform is actually putting that same app that we took from the data center or the transient sort of stage into a container. So we actually shove that application, kicking the monolithic application, kicking and screaming into a container and somehow frig it so it can actually work in a Kubernetes environment. It doesn't like it, but the point is that we now have a little bit more flexibility with that application. We can load balance the request to it. We can spawn more instances of it if we want. We can stop it and restart it, fail it over and things like that a lot more easily because now it's in a containerized environment.
Can I just raise a point there and maybe being a bit contentious? You talked about you can raise another instance of a monolithic app. Is that not a sort of impossible environment?
No. I mean, if you, it depends on what the app is doing. But you can certainly, if you put a load balancer in front of it in terms of the architecture, you should be able to send requests to different instances of it, which is a very typical of how you kind of do a cloud native environment.
Okay, and in which case it's multitasking, which is what mainframes did in the first place anyway. So I mean,
So I mean, a lot of those hark back to that kind of design. But the point is, if we can just at least containerize it, the other advantage is that you can now manage it in the same way you'd manage all of your other container applications. That's the idea.
Is that not very inefficient in terms of the use of the containers? Because are you not having to, you're putting much more of the operating environment into each container than you would in a cloud native environment?
So it can be. It just depends on, like I said, what are the quirks of that application? How difficult is it to configure, to customize, or to tweak to make it work in a container environment? The alternative to that is to run it in a Kubernetes environment. So this time, I don't think you can do the XKS services. So you can't use the hyperscaler versions of Kubernetes, but you can use things like OpenShift, Kubernetes, etc. So the kind of third-party distributions of Kubernetes, because what's happening there, and especially this is in the light of the recent Broadcom acquisition of VMware, is that those vendors are pushing and supporting the aspects of Kubernetes that allow you to actually run virtual machines in Kubernetes side by side with your containers. So you have your containers on one side and you have your virtual machines on the other side, but they're all being managed by Kubernetes. And the project that does that escapes me. The name escapes me right now, but that's the idea that you can now do with Kubernetes. Now, like I said, I'm not sure you can do that with the XKS services, the XKS versions of Kubernetes, but you can do it with the third party, the off-the-shelf vendor versions of Kubernetes. Those distributions now support the ability to run virtual machines because there is and like I said, I can't remember the name exactly right now, but there's an extension tool available. So it's an open source, it's a CNCF project, I believe, that you can run that allows you to run your virtual machines side by side with your containers in Kubernetes. And believe it or not, a lot of enterprises are now looking at doing that, looking to run their environment and run their VMware virtual machines in that way, in a Kubernetes environment. So they're opting for OpenShift or whatever, and then they're using that tool to be able to do that for you.
I mean, the interesting thing at that point is it going to be, are we still at the stage here at the sort of re-platform stage where potentially moving those apps to the cloud is not cost effective? Are we, in the sense that you're doing things that are adding layers to it, adding probably layers of complexity to it. And there are sort of interesting questions around monolithic apps as well, in terms of their ability to multi-thread, but also what happens around the database backend. So I think you and I have had the conversation that quite often these are areas that, where, yes, the cloud will be more expensive because it wasn't designed to do what you're trying to do.
Yeah, KubeVirt is the project. I just remember the name. So I just confirmed the name. So KubeVirt with a K, of course, because it's Kubernetes. KubeVirt is the extension or the module that allows you, or the project that allows you to run your virtual machine side by side in your Kubernetes cluster. So that for me would be the other option versus taking the monolithic app. And let's say the monolithic app is too complex or whatever. You say, okay, so that's going to take too long to do, and we've got too many of these. So let's put them all into KubeVirt, and at least now we can orchestrate them and manage them using Kubernetes, and not a different tool and different monitoring apps and observability and yada. You can basically get them all under one roof. Now, again, as you're right, that's not the end product. That's not the end all, because we still have the other stages to go through. So ideally, what you should be doing is moving up to stage 3, which is a refactor, as I would call it, or a modernization of the application. And again, we disagree, I think, in terms of that with the one that Vishakha has actually put on her chart. So she's actually talking about her refactor is a re-architect. So she's saying redesign your app for cloud native capabilities. So almost right again, but not quite. The refactor, my stage 3 refactor, is not a re-architecture, because you're still in a client server environment. You're still doing the client server approach. Yes, you've modernized the app, right? And according to me, you have modernized it by breaking it up. You've at least made it smaller modules. So your invoice is separate from your web, and from your business logic, and from your whatever else you have within the app. So you've modularized the app, right? You've made it into smaller chunks or separate chunks, where things like actually cell-based architecture can come in, right? That's another potentiality there for you to look at. And AWS, I think, and various other ones have talked about cell-based architecture. But the point is, you've at least modularized the application, because my stage 3 is adopting DevOps. And DevOps is, as we've said before, it's not just agile and DevOps and all that kind of stuff. It's not just a technology and tool set. It's also a cultural shift of how you actually develop your application. And hence why on my chart, you'll see a little line between stages 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And there's a reason for that, because it's just a reminder that there's a cultural shift required as well when you go to stage 3. So for me, refactor is not just it's not re-architecting the app. It's just designing or modernizing how the app works. It's still the same app. It's got all those components and features and functions that it had. You've just now kind of made it into smaller modules, or you've separated it into kind of loosely coupled modules. Obviously, the more detailed approach to that would be to turn it into microservices. So turn all of the functions within the application into microservices. But that's still a client-server approach. You still, somebody's making a request, it comes into your load balancer, and your app, whatever your app looks like, monolithic, modular, microservices, will still have to respond to those requests, right? So it's a client-server still. And that's different from when you entirely re-architect the application. That's when you not modernize the application, so modernize the previous version, but actually redesign it completely. So you go away from that client server into let's say, well, it's more of an event-driven architecture. You're now into serverless territory of stage 4. You're into definitely doing microservices. You're doing stateless. You're even doing things like function as a service, which means you actually don't write the code, or your code for your application is now made up of your functions as well as API functions that are available from the hyperscaler. So the entire application is now not just been modernized, it's been redesigned, and its architecture is no longer necessarily that client service. Now a serverless architecture, and it's certainly an event-driven architecture. It's reacting to things based on events and not to requests necessarily.
Yeah, one of the things that I'd like to get across, and I know it's probably not quite part of the sort of 4 hours, 6 hours, or whatever, but when you were describing that stage 4 in yours, that re-architect,
yeah,
is the point at which you really start to see intent-based systems.
yeah.
What was the intent of it? We've had attempts at intent-based networking. There's been 1 or 2 academic looks at sort of intent-based software development and etc. But this really is the point at which, every time you do something, you've got to be thinking, what is the intent of that is to do? Because you're going to automate an awful lot of what happens underneath, as you go along. A lot of that work is going to be automated, and therefore the focus at that point needs to become to linking the intent of the business, the intent of why you're doing this, to the actual code itself. And I just want to see that built in at some point. So it's me getting up on a platform. So you can tell me to get off my platform for my soapbox for a minute. But I like your four steps. I think they're absolutely right. We also talked, and I think you mentioned at the start of this, is that you've got this sort of challenge with the skills of the people.
Yeah.
And I think what I like about the four is it gives maybe people who are thinking from an HR perspective, how do I develop my team? A route. Not only is there a customer journey, there's like a developer and a sort of IT operations journey that people can go on. They'll be able to step people through. We're at the moment we're finding there's these big jumps and you're leaving whole cadres of IT operations and development people behind because they simply haven't kept pace with it. So I think, the way in which you put your stages together, you could almost draw another line in there and say, alongside the technologies that are changing and the customer journey that's changing, here's the journey for the people who are developing these.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I think she does mention that. Obviously, she does mention that in the, and when she talks about refactor or re-architect.
Yeah.
But like I said, that for me, she kind of she doesn't really mention anything about, oh, by the way, you're going to have to adopt DevOps and Agile to do this. That's not in there at all. Whereas my kind of, the tech layer for me in my chart, that does say, well, here's some of the technologies you might end up adopting. Are you ready for these? Because if you're not, then you need to go and skill up in these first and kind of, gear up your environment. And I think that's even more so now than before, because DevOps, as we've said itself, and by the way, we've focused a lot on DevOps modernization recently, platform engineering, SRE, GitOps, and so on. So please go and check out all the videos on the channel in regards to that. I will try and drop some links if I remember in the description of this video as well. But I'm doing a 6-part series on platform engineering at the moment. There's playlists on that and various other episodes already out, so please go and check that out. But the point, Paul, is that DevOps is broken up now into platform engineering, into SRE, into GitOps, and so on. So people have to change their team topology. It's no longer just saying, congratulations, you're a DevOps engineer now, to the developer. You can't just do that anymore. You kind of have to break them up into kind of into the separate teams. So, and obviously make that all happen, make them all communicate and connect. And where are they going to connect? They're just going to be in one room when they talk, or are they slacking each other all the time? What's the kind of the medium and the sort of the appropriate sort of approach to that? You just kind of do stand-ups every day, whatever works. But the point is that you have to adopt that kind of new agile Scrum Master type of approach. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Just learning Rust or Python because you were doing C++ before or JavaScript is not enough.
No, I agree, and that's why it is a cultural shift as much as a technology shift. It is a culture of getting people to think differently. And I know from the second topic we've got that this may well come back in this second topic.
Yeah. But the point being, I think, is that I'm focusing more, my stages are on what you practically need to do to get to these technologies, to get to this stage.
Yeah.
And if you do that, obviously you're not doing it just for the sake of those things, because that's Kubernetes is your new shiny toy, or WebAssembly is your new shiny toy, or chaos engineering or the GitOps platform is your new shiny toy. But you're doing that because you can justify that, going back to the business, this adds value to the business. There's innovation, there's fail fast, there's responsiveness, there's, all those sorts of things. There's, going into new markets and territories, and, and being able to stand up there a lot more quickly than you would do if you were still back in the data center and doing requisition forms and change notices to, change one port on your Cisco switch type of approach, and, things like that. So that's the whole point, I think, of practically, what does this look like? What do I have to do to learn DevOps? Okay, so I need to kind of, need to go and do all these things that we mentioned in order to be, to develop applications in a more modern way. And that whole sort of software development lifecycle then changes in terms of how you do things. You bring in, practices like platform engineering, for example, and so on. So my sort of, they're not really kind of just focused on, the strategy is to, retire these and move these over there and what have you. But it's actually, once you've made those decisions, what does it take to achieve those decisions? And that's what falls into these 4 stages that I put on my chart, because I think that's what I'm trying to highlight, is the practical, pragmatic approach to doing things. Now, okay, so you want to do, containers, right? What does that take? And what are you going to put in that container? Do you put your old monolithic app, or do you want to develop new stuff? Because if you want to develop new stuff, it's not just stage 2, you got to do stage 3 as well at the same time, right? At the same time as you're stuffing your old apps into, containers in stage 2, you also have to modernize your old apps, some of the other apps as well, using stage 3. And that's a whole kind of different approach.
And at what point, and maybe this is for a different topic at a different time, do you have to say you can't go through going through stage 2 and 3, is you need to go straight to stage 4?
Yeah, so that would be part of the decisions, but that's when you do that initial app assessment. When you do your app assessment, you figure out what you have, you figure out things like, does this app have a dependency, like a backend database? Okay, so it does, and if we move it, what does that mean to the database? Do we move the database? And again, there are 4 R's for data migration, but that's maybe for another day, folks. And that then says, does the database, for example, do we move the database, or do we move the data to a more modern database, DB as a service, database as a service kind of approach that's available to us in the cloud, or do we just move that old database, into the cloud? Obviously a newer version of it and a different license of it, and it maybe comes from the marketplace, so we provision it from the marketplace. But the point is that it's still, if it's Oracle over there, we move it to Oracle in the cloud. If it's DB2 over there, God forbid, we move to DB2, in the cloud. Or do we say, well, it's it's an RDBMS, so I think, MongoDB or something like that over EDBS, EDB Enterprise Database, will be able to handle it, in the cloud. So we actually move the data, but not the database itself, right? So we kind of, again, that's a sort of a replatforming of the data, if you like.
Data architecture needs I think never mind 3. It would need a whole hour of our time, I think. To scratch the surface of data architecture.
So, but there is a 4 hours of data migration as well. But anyway, but that's I think the point is what I'm trying to focus on. So it's not necessarily strategy decisions. They're just practical, pragmatic decisions that you have to make, and then what does it take to achieve them, essentially. And that's what my stage 1 to 4 is implying. Now, I did go through this chart last year with Trace Bannon. So Trace and I did a whole video on this, and we broke down all this 4 stages. She absolutely loved the chart. She actually asked for a copy of it, and hopefully she's making use of that. So all of that is available. And again, I'll try and drop the link for that particular video with Trace Bannon into the description of this video. But yeah, that's kind of really the idea. And as we said, when we're breaking things into stuff like platform engineering and so on, that kind of whole cultural aspect starts to come in on stage 3. You can't just say, oh, we'll just modernize that. We'll just rewrite the app. We'll just refactor it into smaller modules or into microservices. Yeah, you can do that. But do your developers know how to do that? Do your architects know how to design that? And are you geared for that type of approach? That's not you don't do it in the same way as you do software development today. It's a much faster, approach. And the whole idea with that was to free up that development pipeline so you could actually be, a lot more agile, a lot faster in terms of how much code you commit to production. You're kind of starting to get into that sort of cloud native way of approaching things. On the extreme side of that, what the likes of Netflix do, which is thousands of changes, I think at least per week, if not per day, to their production code. That's how slick they are in terms of how they use things like, DevOps and platform engineering and GitOps and so on. But anyway, so I think, there's a convergence there, I think, in terms of, or divergence, I should say, in terms of, the stages. I don't necessarily agree with with her refactor, which is a re-architect. I think that's wrong for me. And then, I kind of bring that into a stage 4. That's my re-architecture or redesign. Because as we said, you're kind of taking it away from the that client-server approach. You may be doing things like serverless, stateless, and things like event-driven, approach as well. So, yeah, what else did I want to say on that? I think, as we said, it's not kind of enough to maybe just have that kind of approach on it. But she did get one thing right, which was when she said on premises and not on premise. So I really do appreciate that, because I cringe when I read anywhere when somebody says on premise and not on premises. I mean, if you want to kind of call it, just say on prem for short, and that works equally well for me. And certainly,
I'm with you on that one.
Yeah, I know you are.
It drives me nuts.
Yeah. Yeah, that does drive me up the wall as well. So that's, I think, I mean, like I said, I think there's a divergence in terms of kind of how we see the R's of migration. But I think it's a good effort. It's certainly kind of, for a high level sort of approach, it certainly gives you all the, it covers all the bases, I guess, from that perspective. I think it's just, for me, it's kind of but what does that mean when you actually start doing it? What do I have to do? And what's the tech that I need to use in that space based on that decision that you just made?
I mean, she's got the right sort of track record to be able to provide all that sort of information.
That's what I thought as well.
And you think, okay, and you sometimes feel this is sort of, the sprat to catch the mackerel. They're sort of dangling it out there so that they come, people go and have a longer conversation with it. And that's one of the challenges of looking at these things on LinkedIn. But it enables us then to have this discussion. So
absolutely,
and shouldn't knock it.
Yeah, and it's certainly not as easy as when sort of David Linthicum says, I think it was due to the recent AWS outage, just go multi-cloud. Yeah. Sure, yeah. David, it's not really that easy to go multi-cloud. We're struggling enough to kind of just move into cloud and take advantage of the cloud and reach a stage 3, stage 4, where we're so optimized, in the cloud, the costs rising actually is not affecting us anymore. Let alone thinking of, okay, let's do the same thing but in a different cloud.
And we may, the one thing I want to come back to at some point is getting people to understand that when you go to the cloud, the opportunity to do things more of and differently is so great that of course you're going to spend more money because you're doing more stuff.
Yeah.
Really? Yeah. And work the benefits out, guys. But anyway, that's me getting back on.
Hey, if you are enjoying the content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That would really help me out. Thank you. Let's move on to our second topic. Now, our second topic is, what does it take to become AI native? Now, I don't think the AI native is what we were kind of maybe thinking originally, or when I was originally thinking, but it's still an interesting, point to pick up on. So the whole idea behind this is because I think I picked up, was it me who picked up on this?
Yeah, you did.
There was an article on, where is it? Is it on Medium?
On Medium.
Okay, so you should really go to Substack. Medium is not necessarily the latest trend. That needs to be Substack if you want to be taken seriously. But anyway, there's an article on Medium by a guy called Adrian Cockcroft. Now, Adrian Cockcroft is a tech advisor for Nubank. I don't know if I know Nubank, but and I looked at the LinkedIn profile and it said Greater Salinas area, but he's graduated from City University in London. So do we have a Salinas in the UK?
No. I think he
sounds Spanish or something.
He works and lives out there. He's a Brit, right. But I mean,
But is it in Spain? Huh? Or is it in Spain or the US or something?
It's in the US.
Okay. Anyway,
I think it's California.
Maybe the guys can look this up and let us know. Maybe our dear audience. Yeah, geography lesson for us for Paul and Richard, please. Dear audience, thank you very much.
I think it's California, but I may be proven wrong.
Yeah. Okay. And I also seem to have 39 connections with him somehow. So no wonder he came into my feed. But anyway, so I'll drop the link of the article in the description, guys. But I was just intrigued by the post, and it kind of said, what did you call it? I think he called it directing AI native development. I think that was the name of the post. So there's a number of discussion points, I think, in the blog. I was kind of particularly interested in the kind of the idea of, developers becoming product managers, which is kind of the whole platform engineering term, platform as a product. And again, we've discussed that in the platform engineering series, guys, so go and have a look at that. But I was kind of a little bit, skeptical of which was I was looking at. Oh yes, he made an assertion in the post. Sorry, not in the post, in the article. He said, "I have figured out how to get the tools to do what I want and produce good results with minimal input and minimal error or hallucinations." But he didn't really kind of offer any suggestions as to how he achieved that.
Well, probably his secret sauce.
Yeah.
He's keeping that up his sleeve.
I could have given a high level view of it.
Yeah,
You have to kind of give up all the
well, I'll sort of come back
jewels
at some point to the article that I wanted to look, which I thought was an interesting sort of.
Yes, I do have that on. I do have that. Yeah, I do have that for you. So I will mention that.
But yeah, the thing that got me interesting was I felt with this idea that it moves the build versus buy trade-off, moves it heavily towards open source and building it yourself, which was interesting. If you look back on the previous conversation we've just had about the sort of buying a SaaS thing to replace, buying a SaaS application. This one is saying, actually, you can probably do it
yourself
much more easily. And he gave an example. I can't remember what the example was of a company that's gone down that route, that's got rid of its sale. Oh no, I'll come back to that. Comes in the third one.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, the gist of the article is that he's saying he's effectively using AI agents and presumably either AI code generation or vibe coding in order to achieve what he wants to achieve. And he's kind of has minimal input on what those agents are up to. He kind of orchestrates them, but he's not kind of micromanaging them, I think, as he called it. And he said, but he does admit, and he said, and I quote, "I'm not throwing the entire problem at the LLM in one go and hoping it will figure out what I wanted." So for me, again, the question there, which he doesn't really sort of reveal, is how much are you doing? Is it like one module, one part of the application, or whatever you're trying to achieve here? Or is it kind of helping you across the board, and then it's kind of starting the ball rolling, and then you kind of taking over from there? I don't know. It's not really kind of explained very well in that sense.
It felt to me as if he got the ball rolling and let the agents take over. It didn't feel like, because sometimes you think, where's the sort of double check and the governance issues, etc., that you bring in to make sure that the AI code is right. It really did feel, and maybe that's just the way I read the article.
Let me give the kind of the main points which go through the article, because I gave it its due and put it through Grok to do that. But and then you can come back with the reference points that you had from the other post, I think, that you picked up on. You wanted to mention. Okay, so the main points for me, it said it's AI native development approach. So it's a shift from traditional coding to directing AI agent swarms. So that means more than one kind of group of AI agents for product definition, building, and testing with minimal human input. Okay, so that's fine. I mean, so you can have kind of a swarm that kind of does your product sort of design and definition. Another one does the kind of the building. I presume that's the one that does the code generation, and then the other one does the QA or the testing. Yeah, that's fine. Everybody's kind of pretty much doing that. Most tools, QA tools these days, are using AI to generate, and they even document it for you. I think one other thing he doesn't mention is actually any documentation that he's doing. But anyway, point being is that I think that's kind of achievable. Then he's kind of talking about being his role as kind of a director of these agent swarms. So the developer acts as a manager focused on user needs, spawning specialized agent teams for tasks like architecture, coding, testing, and so on. Then he says modular and hive mind structure. So agents operate in a shared memory system, which will make sense because they all need to kind of know what everybody else is doing, all the other swarms, with a to-do list, mimicking human team dynamics, but without any hiring delays. Okay. This enables rapid cloud-like provisioning, blah, blah, blah. Rapid sprints and iteration, I suppose, and especially if you don't have a lot of humans getting in the way of the decision making. If it's kind of arbitrary and unilateral, then if it's just him doing the decision making, then that would work. But clearly we don't work like that. Businesses and enterprises don't work like that. If you're a single developer or you're a contractor, you could do that. Or you could put yourself on Fiverr and say, hey, I can rapid develop for you a prototype or something. Just give me what you want. Tell me kind of how you want the screen to look like, and give me your logo, and I can take these swarms through that process and make it happen for you in 2 days. I can return a prototype in 48 hours. So I think this is kind of good in that approach, but in an enterprise, I think that's a different kettle of fish. And then the last point is shift in build versus buy and accessibility. So, prioritizing custom built modules over off-the-shelf buys for tailored efficiency, requiring less manual typing, non-deterministic processes are managed via test-driven specs. Okay, yeah, I mean, like I said, that's kind of a deep code one, so not too worried about that. I think the surface ones for me is how much of the code development is being done using this kind of approach. And then the other one that doesn't work for me is the rapid sprints and iteration, because he says you can complete them and make the decisions quite quickly, that won't work as I said, in a business environment.
The one thing that I looked at and it sort of jarred with me was he was talking about operation. He was saying operations people learnt to code, and it became DevOps. And I'm thinking,
not quite.
Did they really? Because he was then going in the AI space. The developers are going to have to do something else, because obviously AI is going to take over the development coding.
Yeah.
And again, culturally, I think there's some challenges there. But I mean, it was I just wrote down, did operations people really learn to code and become DevOps?
Yeah.
I would said no, they didn't. I think that was a real. It didn't gel with me, that one, and therefore it didn't gel when he started talking about developers. We're not going to need to have to developers, because AI is going to do it all for you, and sure, AI will do an awful lot of stuff, and that's probably the point I can bring in. The other article I saw. This is from a guy called Gregory Smith. He's co-founder of a company called Capometrics. Now, I worked with Gregory 10 years ago when it was Capability Platform. And he's obviously, made it a cloud system since then. So he's, brain the size of a planet, really like him as a guy. Can be difficult to deal with on a daily basis, because he does have the brain the size of a planet. But what he was saying was really interesting, because he's been coding AI-based coding for a little while now. Was he said, on the surface, it's absolutely amazing how well it works. And he put the productivity gains were undeniable, features shipped faster, prototypes came to life in hours, and innovation cycles accelerated dramatically. I mean, he's been around the houses enough time to spot that. But he said, here's the flip side. I also spent a significant amount of time reworking that same code to stop technology debt from piling up, which I thought was a really interesting comment. And he was saying it he said the AI generated code often looks perfect on the surface. It runs, it passes tests, it delivers results, but underneath I've seen fragile structures that don't scale. Interesting.
Mm,
Logic that's hard to maintain or extend,
mm.
missing documentation. We were talking about documentation
Yep.
and poor context, and then security gaps and inconsistent standards.
Yeah.
In other words, it works now, but it costs you later. And he has a wonderful term, which I'm going to ask him if I can use it elsewhere, which is fast is good,
Yeah.
sustainability is better.
Yeah.
And I think that's absolutely, and he's come up with a few principles that he now lives by when he's trying to do AI, so AI coding. And and I'll read them, treat AI output as a draft and not a finished product. Enforce human code review and architecture oversight. Set AI governance boundaries, like know where automation adds value, and track technology debt as a real business risk. So I think, again, the danger with AI coding is if you do just, give it a prompt and say off you go and do it, and you don't put the human in the loop, then we could get some, if not immediately, we could get some difficult problems further on down the track.
Well, that's what we were saying about, you can kind of do this as an island, but you can't kind of do it if you're, in groups of people, or you're in a team, or, you have to kind of go through approvals and what have you. Never mind some of the other stuff like, okay, how much is it contributing, which was my kind of query, the documentation side, which we mentioned, and other things. So, I've got no problem with kind of, this is kind of novel. It's a great way to do something. Just in production is slightly different, I think, from, how you would do it, like I said, as a standalone developer. If you're a freelance developer, or if you're, like I said, on Fiverr, and you kind of, can offer people to prototype stuff for them in 48 hours, sure. Yeah, go for it. I mean, I've got no problem with that at all. But that's not necessarily going to stand up in a business environment. What I would like to see Adrian doing is taking it through Nubank, and then let's see if that actually works. I mean, you can tinker with this and experiment with it, but is this actually being done at Nubank? I'd like for him to take it into if he hasn't done it. So here's a challenge for you, Adrian, if you're watching this. Take it into Nubank, and let's see if they actually agree for you to implement this. And if they do, I'm more than happy to eat humble pie and eat my hat and eat my words and 1,000 apologies and all that other stuff as well, because I'm okay with that, because that means I've learned something new. So I'm more than happy to actually do that. But that would be a really interesting thing to do. Anyway, so yes, I mean, I agree with you. I think there's a lot of goodness in terms of some of this stuff. Is it going to change how developers kind of approach code? Of course it will. And we're seeing that already. Even like I think Microsoft and Google have kind of admitted X% of their code is now done using CodeGen, AI CodeGen. It's not vibe coding, but it's AI CodeGen, at least within the with their internal tools. So yes, and I agree. I think with what Gregory Smith, you said, was saying in that there is kind of a time bomb, but I think my point is that we shouldn't be against the tide of this thing happening. And unfortunately, I'm seeing a lot more of that. And actually, especially from, surprisingly, people in the DevOps world are actually doing that. I mean, even Trace Bannon has come out, on a number of occasions on her, in her posts and supporting other people's posts on LinkedIn, saying, we need to be careful. We need to kind of slow things down. Or whatever. The pace of change, you can't really slow it down. The pace of tech and the pace of technology, you can't really slow it down. You can maybe defer it if in an enterprise, but technology itself, you're not going to be able to necessarily slow that down. What I would like to see is, I'm happy with AI code gen, but I would like to see some kind of scrutiny, another stage in the pipeline, if you like, of that, where another AI actually scrutinizes the code and says, not good enough, go back and do this again. to the first model, to the first LLM. So there's a second LLM who's trained purely on what good code looks like, and it's got tons of samples and all that kind of thing. And then when it gets a kind of a vibe code-ish, sort of piece of code from the AI code gen model, it might say, actually, this does not look like good practice. There's no comments on here. There's blah blah in here, or whatever. Not good enough. Do this again. Iterate. And I think that will be a good approach. And I don't see why people are not doing that. People are just kind of saying, "Oh yeah, I can generate code now. Look, ooh, it's all good." Or I can vibe code it, and I've kind of knocked out my prototype. Yeah, prototype is different from running something in production, though, isn't it? That's, I think, is the difference there.
I mean, the thing we're alluding to here is both using the knowledge of what we've learned over God knows how many years of coding systems, but also the sort of the wisdom of the crowd, and knowledge of what's gone before. You can lose that in this environment unless you do what you just said, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Hey, if you are enjoying the content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That would really help me out. Thank you. Cool. So let's move on to our third topic. So now we're going to be talking about, is it the beginning of the end for traditional observability? Now, Paul, this was your baby, and I know you've got quite a lot to come through on that. So I'll let you kind of kick off, and then yeah, let's see where we get to. And I've got a couple of points to mention from Gartner as well.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to get the Gartner take, but certainly from my perspective, when we were talking about putting this together, I start from the ground, the ground zero position that says observability got hijacked by the monitoring, IT ops monitoring teams, and actually changed or really destroyed the original intent of observability. Whether you were a network performance manager who used real packet data to observe what was going on, or you were a DevOps person who was using observability to see what was happening inside the code as it went towards production in a pipeline. So I think and the term became completely abused by the IT monitoring world, because you started to put together server monitoring and application monitoring and network monitoring. And then somebody obviously looked at the network monitoring people and said, "Oh, they use the term observability. Let's use it right across the piece." I just annoyed the hell out of me. So that was one. So I don't think observability ever was a genuine process, or let's call it a discipline within the IT monitoring space. AI ops came along and with a lot of potential for doing something very differently. But was based still around an old monitoring type of capability. It wasn't really moving to predictive. So what we were you and I have been talking about is how the heck do you turn it into something predictive rather than something that is purely acting after the event and telling us what we should have already known. We've talked about silos of information. And so I've worked quite closely from time to time as an analyst with a firm called Big Panda, who are probably they're probably the only, well, even they don't use the term AI ops anymore, but for a while, them and Moogsoft were the two that really were the AI ops standard bearers, if you like.
And Paul, what happened to Moogsoft?
They got bought by, was it Cisco? Who?
Dell.
No, Dell. Dell bought them. God knows what that was. I mean, that was a strange one, but Big Panda is still out on its own, doing its own thing. And it's really now moved, and it's calling it, and I'll come to the nub of it, but they're calling it agentic IT operations. As soon, yeah, I know, from a marketing term, yeah, all right, okay, go with it. But they looked at ChatGPT when it first came out, as how could they use that in the whole sort of end-to-end approach. and did some interesting work with them, right back in 2022, yeah, it must have been 2022 when they first started using it, and they were trialing it. They did, and it had some interesting things, but they've gone massively further now. And what's really happened is particularly the ability to map all the elements of a system using graph technology as well as vector databases and graph technology. And to be able to capture not just the event data, and not even just trace data, but the LLMs are now able to capture, as they've said from Big Panda, that they can capture drawings that an engineer's put together that says this is how the system works. They capture knowledge and everything, and this knowledge graph that you have is where you're now getting training AI, LLMs or training, using RAG techniques
Yeah.
to pull together all the elements of what I would call almost like a knowledge base of what's going on, so that and it was interesting when you were talking in the previous piece about an AI agent looking at the quality of code. It could check the quality of the code that's been written by a different agent. What Big Panda are doing now is providing an AI agent that can look at how all the trace elements that are, and all the logs, events, everything that's going on, and start to say, and look at an application and say, is it performing the way it was supposed to be performing? Is it starting to go wrong? Do you get that predictive piece? So from my perspective, we were talking about as observability, got to the end of its life. Is it needs something else? It never really started for me. It was badly misused in terms of IT operations. But this new thing, I think there's a real opportunity now and Big Panda have been very honest and said the predictive piece is still in the early phases. I've looked at their 2025 stuff,
Yeah.
and they're being very careful to say, we're in the trial phase of doing this at the moment. But the way they're going to use a graph database, to pull it all together, the way they use vector databases and start capturing not just observable data, but the knowledge of the business.
Yeah.
That was, I think, an absolute game changer for me, that says because we've been talking about predictive IT operations, predictive analysis of IT operations for the best part of 5 years now.
Yeah. Yeah.
We ain't got there.
Yeah.
I remember back in 2021 calling aiops the angry teenager.
Yes.
And we can do this.
I think you called it on one of our talks.
Yeah, that's right. The angry teenager. And now it's AIOps is probably the disillusioned old man, So it's gone through all those sort of terminology, but I think it's morphed into something quite different. I think, and there'll be others other than Big Panda, but it's one I happen to know quite well and know the guys at Big Panda. And to me, one of the things that was really interesting, again, when we were talking through with them, is the ability now with AI, and we're talking about AI code generation, and that shift from buy to build capability that was in the Adrian Cockcroft's thing, is that the guys at Big Panda are saying they've got a company, and I'll get the details of which company it was, that got rid of ServiceNow and wrote their own. And it wasn't, he said, and they've said, well, look, people like Apple have done that years ago. They did that years ago. But smaller enterprise companies are saying, no, I'm not going to use ServiceNow. I can write my own. That's far more appropriate to me, makes more sense of the CMDB, or makes much more sense of everything going around it.
Yeah.
And that could be really disruptive for companies like ServiceNow and the like, Salesforce and ServiceNow. And what was in our the previous topic about repurchasing a SaaS solution, actually there may be a real opportunity in some areas to use this sort of technique to write your own because it's that quick to do.
Right.
But so for me, I really was when you put up, the title of the topic, I'm thinking, well, was never bloody born. It can't really die, can it?
Yeah. 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 I mean, I do agree. I think, unfortunately, it never really observability. And for me, it kind of, stems from that sort of DevOps really approach. That's kind of where I picked up
Yeah,
the term, originally. It has been hijacked and it's been used kind of in, other areas. We've seen things like, network observability, the likes of, Aviatrix, the Thousand Eyes, and people
yeah,
like that we've mentioned in the past. More recently, you and I picked up on data observability from the likes of Monte Carlo
yeah,
and some of those kinds of vendors, newer vendors kind of coming in. And the AI ops aspect of it, the kind of the dumb AI, as I would kind of call it, the original kind of non-generative AI sort of approach. Is kind of really, again, never took off, didn't really sort of, Moogsoft, as you said, a couple of people, a couple of vendors picked up on it, but not really everybody was doing it. Although, heuristically, the idea of what it was trying to do was sound. It was, identify patterns. So I'm not having to do the same damn thing every week to start the service that keeps crashing. Tell me that it's happened before. Tell me how many times it's happened. Tell me how I fixed it last time. And tell me some of the reasons, why we found it, what was the culprit, of how we fixed it and so on. So we can kind of get some kind of discernible pattern out of some of the alerts or events that we're receiving. So that was kind of the focus on it. Now, as I said, Gartner also put out some content on this recently, and I was kind of reading some of that both at the IOCS conference, which I attended, but also in terms of their specific reports on observability. So they're very much reflecting, I think, what we've been saying, and I think what you and I had been communicating prior to that. So it was actually a good affirmation for me to see someone like Gartner saying, yeah, we need to improve on this observability stuff, and you guys are not doing it. It's kind of all screwed up. The whole market has been kind of messed up a little bit. So the first area which they talked about was really making observability. They said it cannot remain static monitoring and alerting anymore. It cannot just sit there and say, by the way, your hard drive has failed. But that's all I can do. Or, that Kubernetes cluster was just, the pod has gone down. Bye. It can't do that anymore. It has to kind of say, okay, but I've told Terraform to restart it. Or do you want me to tell Terraform to restart it? Or you told me to tell Terraform to restart it, so I have done that now. And here's the results of it. It has to take some action. It cannot just be a passive, sort of and static way of monitoring and alerting. So that was one aspect of it. So that sort of automatic remediation is kind of needed. I'm not sure that was Gartner's term, but I'll take it if they didn't say that. Automatic remediation is kind of what is required there. The other aspect is touching on the AI, which they mentioned in terms of AI ops, and they said AI ops has to move into a Gen AI approach, which is what you're saying, right? Yeah. It cannot be the old dumb AI of AI ops anymore. And, there's obviously lots of different reasons for that. And as you described some of them, the other aspect of that, which I would really love to see, and hopefully it's within my lifetime, is not just being able to identify patterns and correlate the events and yada, 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 which is kind of what the old AI ops, the dumb AI ops was supposed to do. So should we, hang on, before I go on, should we call that Gen AI ops then? Maybe? Is that a new term I've just coined there?
I think what you're describing is what Big Panda are calling agentic.
Yeah. So it is taking the action as well. So it would, based on those patterns, based on what it identifies, it will take the actions, which goes back to our, automatic remediation, as we said. But the point there, for me, that I would like to see is the the fact that because we now have a Gen AI, let's pretend we have a Gen AI model in the aiops platform or in our observability platform. So essentially that means converging aiops and observability, which is a good thing again. So I would like to sit there in front of that platform and say, so what's wrong with my Kubernetes cluster? Not sure, but this pod has failed and it's running this app in it, or these apps are running, and I'm not really sure whether it's the service mesh that's caused it, a networking trap, whatever, or there's a DDoS attack happening. I don't know. Okay, so I would like at that point say to the observability platform, speculate. Give me the top 5 reasons why you think this has failed, and because it's a generative model, it will do that. Now, the suggestions might be crap, or 4 out of the 5 might be nonsense or not very useful, or stuff you've already tried to try and fix that problem. But 1 or 2 may be useful. Maybe 1 or 2 are things that you didn't think about and go, oh, yeah, maybe that's right. Maybe point 2, let me go and check that. Let me go and do that. So that's the idea. And because that AIOps aspect of the observability platform knows more about the melt data, the metrics, events, logs, and traces data that's coming in than I do, because I'm not sitting there reading all the logs, right? I'm not sitting there reading all the events and everything else coming through. It knows that. I don't. It's doing that capturing, as you said, it's putting it into those vector databases, into a graph database for the relationship or whatever it's trying to do. It should be able to go, oh, I can speculate on that for him. Sure. Let me go and do that. And it'll kind of work out the top 5 and go, there you go, Richard. I think could be, go and try these things, or it could be these top 5 things that's causing the problem. And I think that is fantastic. That would be a great thing to have versus this kind of, very nonchalant, I don't really care. I'm just going to tell you this thing, very static sort of approach to how we do things, even the pattern identification.
Well, I think the interesting thing from my perspective, reading up on what's coming down the track here, is the potential ability to completely automate the level 1 support, level 1 side.
Yeah.
And so that you can effectively, which was offshored, put level 1 support somewhere else, you reshore that to an automated plan, and then you probably you upskill some of the level 2 support that you've got, so that when those 5 come, those 5 suggestions come in, you're much more ready to play around and see what one really works and build it back in. There must be a loop that goes back in so that the next time it's far more accurate, when it does it. But absolutely look to complete automation of level 1 support. That should be the primary aim. And that's where it seems to be going, although I think it's very early days yet.
Yeah. So just to touch a little bit more on what Gartner was saying. So Gartner said, according to this report, it said they did a survey on this, and they said a number of their 44% of the clients that they surveyed are actually spending $1 million per year on their observability, and $10 million was spent by 4.5% of them. $10 million. Can you believe that? So why? Well, it said because they say because the magnitudes of increasing in complexity of the data, of the melt data that they're getting. They got hundreds of terabytes of ops telemetry data, the melt data that are being gathered by all these systems, because the environment is getting more complex. Now, as we said, there's kind of this new telemetry types, with Gen AI coming in as well. So you've got different type of telemetry by Gen AI platforms. That's going to add even more complexity. So a lot more, as they called it, overwhelming noise and no signal within that noise, no kind of discernible patterns. So Gartner recommends 5 ways to control observability costs, because this was kind of around, how to control your observability. So 1, align with business priorities. Not all apps are equal. So prioritize which apps you're going to kind of be verbose on it when it comes to the melt data, melt telemetry. Tame the telemetry by having over 50% only collecting everything. Not don't collect all of the data. Don't collect all the meld data. Only focus on like 50% of them that you need to collect the data. Don't commit to all of them. So if a new app is born into production, that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to monitor it 100%. We're not going to get 100% of its melt telemetry. So it kind of harks back to point one. Point three, implement native controls. So use telemetry pipelines to read the data better. That pipes into what you were saying about the new Gen AI ops, the new AI ops that's kind of using Gen AI to process the data. 4, rationalize and consolidate. Reduce verbose reporting, as we said. Reduce the number of monitoring observability tools. Typically, apparently, enterprises use 10, 15, 20 tools to do their observability. So this is again across the spectrum that they surveyed. And then finally, number 5, utilize AI for efficiencies, as we said. So old AI ops needs to be replaced by, as we said, the new Gen AI ops. And also that helps to enhance RCA, as we said. So kind of, like I said, give me the explainable insights, give me the top 5 reasons why you think it's failed type of approach. Now, the only point I didn't agree with them was they said to democratize observability. And I don't agree with that. I don't think you should be giving observability to every Tom, Dick, and Harry, because you're just going to have like 1,000 people having 2,000 views or something. And I think that's not going to work. So that's the only bit about their sort of top 5 ways to control observability costs, which I disagreed with. But everything else, I think, relatively good and makes sense.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think I'm desperately trying to take in everything you were saying there, and I think I need to sort of come back around the loop on some of those, because I get the sense that where this is headed, it will start to save costs. I think that's quite right. I mean, I was intrigued by the fact that all that data was growing so much. Don't capture all the data. I think my suggestion, my recommendation would be, unless you've got an app that really isn't that important to you, apps you need to capture all the data, but you then very quickly, and this is where AI should work really well, is work out what's the critical data that's going to show whether systems are starting to degrade, whether applications are starting to degrade. So I would be worried. One of the things about the original idea of observability was you observed the actual packets going down the line.
Yeah.
When you look at logs, you're only observing what the developers decided were going to be put into the logs. And I think there's a danger of that happening again, where you miss some critical information. So I think, the role of the LLM must be to very quickly say, we've got all it, and an open telemetry should make life a lot easier. I mean, one of the other things we haven't really talked about was open telemetry should make it easier to capture, manage, and sort of store the data. But then get it down to what are the basics that I'm going to need. Then don't say, oh, well, I never need to look at that, because, Sod's law says it's always the same, isn't it? You say, oh, I don't need that piece of data. And that's the one that you needed when US East 1 went down, that was the bit of data I missed at US East 1. You think, can't do that. So I think LLMs can help you reduce the load of that. I mean, as I say, get rid of level 1 down to completely automated, level 1 support down to completely automated. That's a great wish list to have, and the likes of Big Panda are saying it ain't quite here yet, but we're going down that route.
Yeah. Okay. So just to conclude on that then, so observability needs to step up, as we said, and do more remedial sort of actions, automated actions, remedial actions. So automation, infrastructure as code, GitOps kind of triggers something needs to happen. It needs to be a lot more proactive, I think, and kind of that's what it is doing at the moment. And then, as we said, observability needs to incorporate Gen AI, so that into its AI ops. So having that sort of Gen AI ops, if you like, I think again, I would I agree with that conclusion from Gartner.
There's a couple of useful one's a series of predictions that Big Panda came up with for 2025. What was happening around this space in little 2-minute chunks of YouTube, but you can get it through one link, and I'll send you the link to that.
Okay.
And also an ebook that's well worth having a look at. It's actually quite good.
Fabulous. Well, let's include the links, definitely, and then maybe in the January projections episode we can actually look at those as well.
And
we'll certainly include the link for the ebook. That's always useful. Okay, right. I think we're there, Paul. Thank you very much. Appreciate all your comments and input as always. All the links for everything that we talked about and then some will be in the description of the video. Sometimes I do run out of space to get everything into the description of the video. So do look out for a pinned comment sometimes in the video comments section. You'll see some more maybe data, some more information, more links included there. And tell us what you guys think about all of this. I guess we kind of need a little bit more interaction from you. Tell us what you want us to look into as well for the new year. Any interesting reports and articles, blog posts, videos, etc. will be, again, of interest. We'll certainly consider those for you as we go into 2026. So feel free to actually make some comments on the topics for today that we've discussed, but also make some suggestions for new topics that we can look at in 2026. I hope you've all enjoyed this episode. Please support me in all the usual ways, and we will see you next time. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support me. You may also want to check out some of the other videos on this channel. Bye for now.